Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
Hey folks, Ben and Bryce here, just checking in because we wanted to say what, Ben? Happy New Year!
Geez, that was professional.
Hey, we just wanted to quickly let you know that we actually are taking a break, aren't we, mate?
We are taking a little break.
We have pre-recorded today's episode, but we wanted to make sure you still had some content, but we didn't want the opportunity to pass without saying...
No, cue the beach music and the seagulls in the background.
That's where we are. We're holidaying with the family, but there's lots of great information in this episode, and we have got so much planned for the couch in 2017, haven't we, mate?
Oh, I don't want to give it all away in one go, but all I can say is a whole new way to research property we're going to introduce as a product for the couch listeners. Very exciting.
Cutting edge.
Cutting edge, absolutely. Talking about location doing all the heavy lifting. Have we got some investment grade opportunities there?
Talk about not making dumb decisions anymore, mate.
No, we're going to help them. We're going to improve the way in which you can validate a property. Oh, anyway, I'm giving too much away.
You're giving too much away, mate.
Too much away.
But that's okay. But folks, enjoy this episode, and we will see you in the upcoming weeks. Next week, in fact, with a new episode of The Property Couch.
So Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. All right, folks, you're on The Property Couch, where each week Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property investing. And here this week, as he is every week, is Ben Kingsley. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. How are you?
Very, very good.
Very good.
Q&A day.
Q&A, we love it.
Mate, when we see it in the diary that it's Q&A day, we get very, very excited. So
it's because we haven't enough time to prep actually a type of show, and we've got all this wonderful questions to answer. So we sit there and go, how's your week been? I've been so flat out, mate. Have you got an idea for today? No? All right, Q&A day.
I was about to say, can we follow on from that? How many episodes have we actually prepped for? Probably 3.
We tried once to put something in the diary, didn't we?
We sounded like a robot, didn't we? So there you go, listeners. We don't really prep. We just come in here and riff it. But we're very fortunate to get lots of really cool questions.
We do.
I've got a question from Volkswagen.
Bang, straight into it.
Volkswagen. On Facebook. So clearly
he's
alias.
Maybe.
Good afternoon, gents. Thanks for the gold that you provide. It's both educational and inspiring. I enjoy listening to your show on my commute to and from work each day. And now it's fully up to date with your shows, I enjoy the footy banter, so keep it coming. Oh, mate, we've got to wait for footy season to start.
I know, bring it on.
I have a quick question. How would you tackle this situation? I'm 33 years old and married with 2 young kids with plans for number 3 in the future.
Oh, there's one way to probably invest in property, not have that third kid. Just kidding, of course, children are beautiful.
Mate, we're not the family planning podcast. I'm currently rent vesting. I have subsidised housing thanks to my career with one investment property in Warner, north of Brisbane. In brackets, I bought this before I started to listen to your podcast, close bracket.
Ooh.
I bought off the plan, and in hindsight now, armed with the information provided by your podcast and other books on investment property, I would have steered away from that investment and bought based on location. Mm-hmm. Hopefully this property will do some heavy lifting in the future.
Maybe.
My question is in reference to LMI and LVR. LMI, of course, lender's mortgage insurance, and LVR is loan to valuation ratio. Is the LMI attached to a loan dissipate over time as your LVR approaches the 80% sweet spot, or does it remain until the whole loan is paid off? And given I've saved up a good cash reserve, would it make sense to pay just enough to make my LVR 80%? Thanks again for your time. Really good question about the mechanics of lender's mortgage insurance.
Okay, so we'll start from the top. What is lender's mortgage insurance? Lender's mortgage insurance is an insurance policy that the banks take out against you in the event that you don't repay them their money. So if you think about it in a comical sense, the insurances knocked on the bank's door one day and said, I know you only lend to 80%, but how about we put something together, a JV together where you lend up to 90, and in some cases back in the old days, 100% of the value of the property, and we'll insure the risk of you doing that, but guess what? We'll make the borrower pay for it. Okay, and so in some cases you can capitalise that insurance premium, which means you can add it to the loan, and in other cases, depending on some lending criteria, it might cap out at say 90% or 95%. So it's very hard to get 100% lending. There are some house and land package companies that work in with the banks to do 100% lending, but it's unusual. All right, so that's the concept. Now, so it doesn't protect you as the borrower. It doesn't protect you as the borrower. It only protects the bank, but they get you to pay it. So that's the sneakiness of it. In fact, I'm a bit angry about the amount of lenders' mortgage insurance that gets paid out there, because I think it is absolutely money for jam for these insurance companies.
Yeah, let's get all of our listeners to we all pull our money so we've got a capital base,
there
and we can become the third LMI provider in the country.
Wouldn't that be good?
You sit in the back room counting checks, aren't you?
You'd postcode protect it, and you'd knock back certain types of properties, and you'd be, anyway, we're not here to make money that way, but that's the sort of approach that we think. We think that these are the big boffin, people up in level 50 of a, big high tower in a city and just counting all their cash, and we don't think it's great. All right, now the question you're asking, how long does the premium last for? Well, this is what the insurers argue, that the premium is for the life of that loan. Okay, so it means that for the 30 years you're protected. But you make a great point, Volkswagen, in terms of coming back to when your value of your property grows beyond the loan to value ratio of 80%, then technically there's really nothing that they're insuring. They can almost go to the bank with that cash. So that is where it becomes really frustrating, because unlike car insurance and house insurance premiums, if you do choose to change lenders in terms of refinance your car loan or whatever, you get a rebate. But these lenders and lenders mortgage insurers do not give a rebate. And it's non-transferable, Bryce, and now I'm getting angry.
You got your angry voice on.
I've got my angry voice on, because it should be transferable and there should be a rebate. It's bull dust. I'm calling bull dust. There you go.
It is a moment in time, isn't it, Ben? You paying a premium in a moment in time.
Correct.
And therefore, as you said, there's no money back at any point. There's no prorating. You've paid it, move on. So the LVR becomes irrelevant after that moment in time.
Correct. So let's say you buy a 95% LVR, okay, and you pay your lender's mortgage insurance, and then you see a bank who's got a better deal. Well, if you want to refinance to them, and let's say your LVR, your loan to value ratio is 85%, which LVR is basically measured by the loan amount divided by the value of the property as a percentage, okay? So that's the loan amount divided by the value of the property, just repeating that, just so you got that right.
So a loan of 800,000 against a property worth $1 million, 80%.
Correct. Okay. So the reality here is, if I then say, okay, I want to refinance to another lender, but I've got to pay a brand new premium, and I don't get a rebate on the old premium that I've paid, it's a rort. I'm calling it. It's a rort.
It's a privilege. We just get the opportunity to pay it twice, mate. If we want to revalue to a better opportunity, we get to pay it twice.
Well, then obviously it doesn't make then you think, the interest rate's better, but ultimately once you put all them all together, you may not be better off financially. Now, one good thing about lenders mortgage insurance, and it's got nothing to do with the insurance companies or the banks, but the ATO does recognise it as tax deductible. So effectively, you can claim the lender's mortgage insurance premium over 5 years. Okay, so it can be written off over 5 years as a tax deduction.
Subject to your accountant's advice.
Subject to, yes. Well, I think that is tax policy, so I don't think we need to go there. But yeah, you're right. We'll protect ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go, Volkswagen. The LMI is...
Do you have a diesel or do you have a petrol? You might be able to get your money back on your Volkswagen.
They might get a rebate
there. Fuel economy, yeah.
Very good. And given I've saved up a good cash reserve, would it make sense to pay just enough to make my LVR 80%? I've got a rule on mortgage insurance. Most people say to me...
Listen to this because it's gold.
We've said it before on the podcast, but embrace it when you have to, avoid it when you can. And embrace it when you have to is largely if it means that you can control a better quality asset and the benefit outweighs the cost. Lock and load. Knock yourself out.
Case in point, we're going back probably to 2010. I was able to release $110,000 by paying, I think it cost me $8,000. So it cost me $8,000 to get access to $110,000. Now I still need to service all of the loans and so forth. So I mightn't have had the equity in that property, but I thought, what an opportunity this is in terms of my gearing. Obviously, I'm in the accumulation phase of building out my portfolio. So at that time, I've gone, that $110,000 could form a deposit for another property that I could buy. And so it made sense for me playing the long game to embrace it.
Mate, love it. There you go, Volkswagen.
Volkswagen.
Two very good concepts there, LMI and LVR. Very, very good.
All right, we've got one here from Jamie Brown. Hi guys, long time listener to the podcast and currently just completed your book. I have a question regarding whether you approve the book. Thanks for buying the book. Everyone, if you haven't bought the book, get out there and buy the book. I've located numerous websites regarding bank foreclosed properties, requesting membership fees to access the information. Are there ways to retrieve this information yourself, or can you expect to purchase this property for under market value? And if so, how much can this process differ from a typical purchase? So we're now talking about foreclosed properties, or mortgage in possession is what we call them here. Foreclosure is more of an American term.
American term, yes. And there's plenty of American examples and courses and things. But largely what they're looking for is, the bank they're trying to capitalise on a fire sale, aren't they?
Correct.
Where the bank's just got exposure, they want to get out and not necessarily worry about the market value. What I'd say is for most people with our conservative strategy, in the areas that we're buying, it's not as if you're going to get them under market.
No.
And even if you think about auctions that are under probate, you're not getting any bargains there either, because you've got to turn up and there's two or three people who want to buy it. So ultimately, it's usually in areas that aren't in the high demand. So for me, we talked about it before that it's a filtering system. So if you pay a fee and someone can bring it all together and help you, but I think there's largely a bit of a myth around getting quality properties under that scenario.
That's right. In some cases, some of the policies are that they need to advertise it in the paper. So there's these people who are doing all of that filtering work for you and they're asking for a fee. So we're not knocking these types of sites, and in some cases, you might be arguing that yes, you will get it under market. So if you're going into an area where there is a low level of demand and still strong supply, well, the bank is going to take whatever the bank can get. They still usually have a reserve, so most of them aren't, a non-reserve type auction. So you can potentially buy under market value, but the actual area itself is underperforming. So you might be thinking, well, I get a quick gain of 30 grand or 40 grand or 50 grand on what it would have cost me to buy it if I had bought it, at a non-mortgagee sale. But the reality is you're going to be sitting in an area that might be doing 2 or 3% return. So you're sitting back going, really? Was that worth it? Was that, So coming back to that whole under market price point, there are times when you can get under market. And that is, as an example, if a block of apartments are going for sale and there's 40 or 50 of them, well, it's very hard for someone to roll in with 10 mil. All right, so there's a few people that have that sort of money, and so they can potentially get a bargain because they're buying them in one line. Whereas for everyday Australians who are trying to get that opportunity, not really there. And I've said this before about buying under value. The marketplace sets the value. Okay, so that's how economics works. The value is set by supply and demand and what people are willing to pay to make that transaction work. A willing buyer and a willing seller. That's how you set value. So if you've got it less than that, what does that tell you about how long it's been on the market? I mean, if it's been on the market for 160 days and you're thinking you're getting under market, no. What's happened is that area, property prices are going down. A bit dangerous.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. I'm trying to think back if I've ever been offered a foreclosed opportunity in 18
blue chip location.
In 18 years of doing this, and the answer is well and truly no.
I mean, look, your real estate agents use deceased estate as a means to think mentally. You're thinking there could be an opportunity here, right? And I think it's a good marketing tool for them. But the reality is if there's demand for it, it'll go for what it's worth.
But if it's a deceased estate, as we talked about previously, it's going to go to auction. No, there's usually
Smart, isn't it?
a brother in London and a sister in New Zealand, and they all can't agree. So auction day is often the easiest way to be the independent solver of all family politics. So,
I agree.
Very good question. This is from Bodie Lewis. Thank you, Bodie. Hey guys, came across the podcast a few weeks ago and have binged a year and a half worth of episodes in 3 weeks.
Wow. What do you do? I mean, that's a lot of
That's
hours of listening.
impressive, mate. Well done.
Sorry to waste
stuff.
all that time for you.
My now wife and I recently got married and are now looking to get ourselves into property. We live in Manly and Sydney, have a good double income and a considerable deposit saved, and then now trying to decide the best property approach for us. The maternity leave at my wife's work is fantastic, so we are not expecting any dip in salary income as we begin to have children. That is good. Our long-term goal is to have a few investment properties wherever it makes sense to buy in Australia, and then a PPR in or around Manly.
Oh.
My question to you, with our income, we could probably get a loan of up to 1.5 M and still be able to comfortably live. But in your experience, should we start purchasing an investment property that's well within our means, e.g. something for around the 700 to 900 mark, and continue to rent in Manly? Or should we try to stretch ourselves and buy a property at our upper limit that we live in for now, and then think about investment properties later on? If we were to buy something a bit cheaper in an area that made sense, I'd imagine we'd be able to continue renting and then buy a second more affordable investment property as equity grows in the property and we continue to save. Take a breath. In other words, are we better to aim for a number of cheaper properties that we gain a small amount of capital growth, or one more expensive property that we might achieve large capital growth as it's off a larger base? Any thoughts, words of advice would be much appreciated as we're undecided what to do next.
Mate, this is Property Investing 101. This is probably, this summarises most people that we see professionally in terms of trying to work out what the best strategy is for them. So the key takeouts for me were ultimately our long-term goal, big rock in the jar comment, is about getting that family home in Manly. So from a modelling point of view, because that's the only way we can do it, we basically, put our financial controller hats on, and effectively what's happening is we then try and work out, well, how quickly a property price is going to continue to keep growing in Manly. Because if we think about it like this and we say the end game is the property in Manly, and we're looking to potentially be able to afford that in 10 years' time, well, that $2 million median house price in Manly could potentially be 3.3 to 3.8 million by that time. And we've got to take a debt against that with after-tax dollars. So this is about life priorities, and this is why it's case by case for each household to work out what's best for them. In the sense that if they do say, yes, this is our ultimate long-term goal, then what we would normally look at is to try and buy that first. Okay, now we might buy it as an investment first, and then, for the first 2, 3, 4 years, so we can get some advantages out of that, keep renting, and then maybe provision a $200,000 or $300,000 reno budget to bring it up to the standard. So we would try and buy sub-median value and then try and improve that asset for when we move into it, and then build the portfolio after that. Because the principal home is by far the most important decision potentially for Bodhi in that particular circumstance. So that's where we try and ascertain, clarify, evaluate your personal goals and what's important to you. Because we've said before, rent vesting is actually an easier way to create long-term wealth, and you'll be wealthier for that. But if you don't have that home that you mentally are striving for, that money won't make you happy. Okay, you won't. And then if we have to reverse out that investment strategy so you can get into your family home, well then guess what? We won't have any investment properties that are going to provide passive income for life. So it really is important. And most people, once we press them on this point, they would normally say, yes, I do want that family home. So we would try and put that into the jar in some way and then effectively progress from there.
Nothing more to add, Ivis. That is unbelievably well said. So there you go, folks. Not only did Bodhi
get some advice on the cash flow.
Yeah, not only did Bodhi Lewis get some nuggets of gold there, but I think the whole listener base would have got that too. So very good, mate. No wonder you're the Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
Oh, well, runner-up, mate. 2016, runner-up.
Doesn't matter to me, mate. You're the Property Investment Advisor of the Year to me.
Thanks, mate. That's very kind of you. All right, so Mike Busby, sorry. Property related, finance related.
All right, rewind, start again.
Okay, Mike, it's Ben. How are you? Ideas, suggestions, love the podcast. Got on board episode 69, been back to the start and nearly caught up again. Thanks for listening. I get excited about driving anywhere now because of your podcast. Well, we might have to keep making more podcasts. We might have to do an in-between episode, just so Mike can get in the car and drive somewhere there. My question is, do you attach an offset account to each loan, or can you have one offset account attached to multiple investment loans? What makes more sense? Bryce?
Well, the answer is you want to put the offset account next to your most expensive debt. Fill up the bucket and then put an offset account next to the next most expensive debt. So you can practically have offset accounts against everything.
Yes.
But ultimately you're channeling your money into one at a time.
Yeah, that's right. So it's the owner-occupied one first, which as Bryce was alluding to. But so effectively, we will always have our owner-occupied debt is our non-deductible debt. So we have the first offset against that. Now, technically, can one offset account link to multiple loans? No, it can't. Okay, so the idea is it's just too difficult for the bank to determine what percentage of that one account that it offsets the loan balance for all of the investment loans. So how it would work, some banks allow you to have multiple offset accounts and some banks don't have the technology yet. But I suspect the market is telling them if they want to get investment savvy investors using their banking products, that everyone will move more towards setting up multiple offset accounts against multiple loan accounts. So Bryce, 100% right. We go owner-occupied debt first and we always fill that bucket, and then we go most expensive. So we have multiple offset against multiple loan accounts.
I was chatting to a client this week, and they are a rent investor.
Yep.
Got 2 investment properties, and the question was, should I fix my rate now that it's really quite low? And because we talked about it's been quite historical. So we had that conversation around, okay, you've got 2 loans, fix it on your highest exposure, so the highest debt to give him some comfort, and leave it variable on the other one, because then he can still have the offset account against the variable, because if he fixes both loans, the offset strategy's out the window. Yeah,
there's only some very small minor lenders who allow offset accounts against fixed rates. So the reality is yes, we want to make sure that we've got enough capacity to fill up that bucket, because the worst thing you could ever do is set up an offset account or a variable loan with an offset, because you've got a fixed loan.
Very good, very good. How are we going time-wise? Okay, not too bad, not too bad. This is from Tim Johnson. Hi, hey guys. I've listened to about a dozen of the shows and I'm really enjoying it so far. So thanks for the great content. Apologies if you've already covered these and I haven't got to it yet, but I'd love to hear more about the following. 1, if looking at a suburb property that's historically gone up 10% per annum versus a suburb that's gone up 7% per annum, you could either conclude that the first is better performing suburb and assume it will continue to be, or the second is good value and there's room for capital growth. I'd love to get your thoughts on how to think about these 2 very different conclusions that you could draw from the same data. I've heard you mention the term regression analysis. Mate, that's one of your chestnuts.
That is one of my chestnuts.
Before, and I'm curious if you've done any research into this. So hold your thoughts on that one.
All right.
Part B. It's common to see managed bond/stock funds apply their strategy to historic data to demonstrate what it would have done had you invested 30 years ago. Do you guys or other property advisors do the same thing with the principles that you apply? And what kind of questions should people be asking their property advisor to validate their approach, that their approach is likely to be a successful one? Cheers, Tim.
Do you want the short answer or the long answer?
Let's go for the medium answer.
All right, I'll see if I can get this very, very clearly. We need to go back to quick fundamentals. All right. So when we're talking about businesses and how they work, there's different challenges in businesses over time. So some businesses that are around today weren't around 10 years ago thanks to innovation and technology and so forth. So when we talk about share prices, we're actually talking about the business that relates to that share price. So, in terms of how do share prices move, so historically, the data is not great. Okay, so in other words, the CEOs of those companies have to make decisions that could either win business and create value or cause the value of the business to decline, which will obviously affect share price, so bad management. So it's very difficult to look at historical performance when it comes to share markets and indexes and bonds and all of that. Hard to look at that correlation in terms of there's a strong historical correlation between performance and growth. Switch over to property, it's a fixed asset, it's a dwelling, and the location is usually pretty strong, which means that when we do that regression analysis, In other words, when we have a look at the past performance and we've seen that it's done really well, the indications are that the future performance is pretty strong. That's why we call them blue chip locations. And that's why the term location
Australia
has been so prominent, is because we know that historically those areas keep performing. And we can look all around the world and see examples of that everywhere. Now, the really fascinating question that's been asked here is around, will that 7% suburb move to a 10% returning suburb or not? And that is all about what is happening in that area. And we've talked about gentrification before, but our data tells us that the gentrification piece is the story that will move it from a underperformer to a, we're using share terminology, we've got basically, blue chip and then green chip. So we see areas that are gentrifying as being those green chip locations that can potentially move into blue chip locations. So some areas can absolutely have, over the course of the next 10 or 15 years, an outperform result against some of the blue chip locations. But when we get out further and out wider, our data tells us that those areas take longer to for that price growth, because the income growth is sluggish in those areas and people have moved out there more on affordability. And it all comes back down to the individual house as we measure it and the individual demographics as we measure them by suburb.
Yeah, because it gets tough sometimes too when you're looking at a smaller data set, because we've bought properties that over the long term have done really well. Over the short term, have done appallingly.
Yeah.
And that's just counter-cyclical investing there. So you've got to have the confidence to be able to see the data, see that it hasn't performed, and then still have confidence in all of the other fundamentals that you talked about, whether it's gentrifying, whether it's blue chip, because we've talked about it before that past performance is a reasonable indicator of future performance, which I think is leading into part two
in
of
these blue chip locations. I think we need to clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah, because the longer the data back we can get, the more comfort we can get around its performance.
Yeah. So, and where's all that data originating from? It's originating from the historical sales of every property in Australia. So we are talking, a property that sold in 1968, then it sold in 1982, then it sold in 1994, then it sold in 2001. And you're building up all of that historical understanding of that property. Then you're building up the historical understanding of the street. Then you're building the historical understanding of the suburb. Then you're building the historical understanding of the local government area. Then you're building the historical understanding of the city. So it is amazing in terms of, so we're talking about literally tens of millions of data points. Now, we are working behind the scenes on analysing more and more of that data to get us more and more precise measurements, because the statements that we're making are still general statements, because what we are using is median value assessment, and that's not true value, it's not average value. And so, Jeremy Shepherd and our research team here, we're talking about building hedonic indexes that will help measure all this. That's where the absolute echelons, the top echelons of research lives, because it comes back to the raw numbers that we then assess.
Very good. Thank you, sir. How are we going? We could sneak another one in. Mitch Ruth here. Hi, guys. I'm an avid listener from way back and love all the content you provide. I'm currently in the early stages of talking to your team.
Thank you.
My question to you revolves around strategy and building out a portfolio. I bought my first investment property with little, no knowledge just over 2 years ago. Luckily, I bought a 2-bedroom 1970s unit, one of 12, in Hove in Adelaide, and so far it's done really well. Historically, its capital growth has been 8.5 and yield 5.4. Great combo. I understand this probably won't continue in the future, but we feel we did well. I think you have done well too.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. Is that a sneeze or a laugh, Ibis? When designing plans and giving the buyer's agent team a clear brief, my partner and I are beginning to assess whether we chase a capital gains property, a cash cow, or a mix. Currently, our cash flow is strong, minimum 2K surplus per month, but this could deteriorate slightly as circumstances change. I'm curious to know, again, the rough numbers you guys work off when considering these options. i.e., what capital gains percentage do you chase and what yield percentage do you chase for both types of properties? We are leaning towards a more capital gains focused property, as with age on our side, rental yields can catch up later, but we want to make sure we can easily manage the repayments so we don't get stuck to not being able to live life. Cheers, Mitch.
Okay. Again, case by case basis. So, but if I was looking at what I've got in front of me, what I'm trying to do is I'll always try and chase growth over yield. Okay. Now,
Likewise.
how does it work? Well, it works on a sliding scale. So if you sort of imagine value and return being on an axis, and the more you move up the value chain, potentially the scarcer the asset gets. And the scarcer the asset gets usually is where the better performance can sometimes live. All right. So as a rule of thumb, the lower the value, usually the better yield you get. Now, I'll give you an example. So the Flemington property that I bought in, I think it was 2007 from memory. Okay, we paid $395,000 for it, right? That property rocketed up pretty quickly to $600,000-$700,000 over a 5-year period, and it's now probably pushing more like $900,000 in the current Melbourne market. Now, in my models, in the conservative models that we use, 7.25%, 1.5% holding costs, 7% management fees, blah, blah, blah. The forecast was that property wouldn't turn positively geared because it was a negatively geared property. I borrowed 106% against the value of that, used the equity in other homes. All right. So what I've done is then that would have been forecast for around 10 years for that property to turn cash flow positive. But because the value of that property grew so quickly, and all of a sudden people accepted that in the area of Flemington, you have to pay a little bit more to, one, live there, but two, to also rent there now because it's a groovy area, gentrified, that all of a sudden the property turned cash flow positive because I still only borrowed $400,000 and I'm now getting, I think it's $550 a week rent. And so it almost went cash flow positive in a period of around 4 or 5 years. So half of what I anticipated.
Yeah,
so if you can pick an area and it goes really well over the course of the 5-year period, then the reality is your rents will also go up. So you'll get cash flow positive out of that. And you've got a bigger value asset. You know, what's that famous saying you have? You buy property for growth and rent keeps you in the market.
Oh, yeah.
Give it to them.
Growth is what you get out of the market, and rent's what keeps you in the market.
There we go. Another bit of gold from Bryce. So that to me is all around looking at that. But if your circumstances change where you maybe have a family and you've got one income and there's going to be cash flow pressures around that, that's what's going to determine whether you go for growth, balanced, or a yield play.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Very good question, Mitch. There we go.
Do we want to do one more?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. Here we go. Amber. Hi, Bryce and Ben. I absolutely love your podcast. I was wondering whether holding costs for an investment property after tax of 2% of purchase is still a realistic estimate in the current market. It's an interesting question. I read your article, which was written in 2014, on how to invest without affecting the family budget, where you use this value. Thanks in advance. So I think one thing we need to clarify here, the after-tax piece is not necessarily what we're talking about. So Bryce, when we do costs for holding a property, we use
Gross.
1 to 1.5% of the value of the property. We use 7% or 7.7% for property management fees. So, and everyone's tax position is different. So to sort of say, we obviously would have had a more detailed example in there. So if we're talking about after tax of 2%, what we're effectively trying to say is what are the returns that we're getting? Because we get returns in two ways. We get returns in the capital value, but when we go and inspect the property, we don't see that in bags of money sitting on the front veranda. And we get it in obviously the rent that we're getting, which in the initial stages is helping to service the debt and then eventually pay the debt down. So we're getting the capital value, which is what we get out of it, and the rent and cash flow keeps us in the game, is what you were saying. And then once you pay the debt down, you get that passive outcome.
Yeah, because you've got two houses side by side, Ben. Same property, same street, same location. It could be positive cash flow for you and negative for me because you're on a much bigger income than me and I'm on the much lower income than you. So therefore, same scenario, same rent, same street, same price. But it just really depends on the individual circumstances. So
we've got a spreadsheet. Have we put it on the podcast before? I think we have. This is where I have mental blanks.
And this is where Ivis gets nervous.
So Ivis is looking to go. We have a break-even calculator. The break-even calculator is on the website. I've just had the big nod.
Yep.
So go and check that out under our free content because that will surprise in terms of where a property will live when it will be break-even. So what type of return do we need to get to make it worthwhile investing? So you can put your debt position in there, you can put your holding costs in there, you can put your anticipated return, and that'll give you a break-even point. And it's a really good calculator to have a look at just to sort of get some confidence around investing in property. So check that out on the Property Couch website.
There you go, folks. Terrific questions. Keep them coming. We love them. We love getting lots of questions from you out in the field, and we'll have some more of those in upcoming episodes too, Ben. So that's terrific. If you're listening on the train or you're sitting down currently and you feel so inclined to flick over and give us a rating, that'll be super. That'll help us stay up in the charts. And if you love social media, follow us. Get involved. Join the conversation. At the Property Couch on Insta, Facebook, Twitter.
And some summer reading.
Google Plus.
Maybe the summer reading, the book for summer reading.
Exactly.
You can buy the book.
Exactly. So, mate, there we go, folks.
We're done.
We're done.
I want to keep talking. Can we not keep talking? No. Are we getting the wind up? We're getting wound up.
What does that mean when Ives does that?
And so he's gesturing and cutting my neck, but that's cut. Or what's that? Get moving your waffling, Ben. Okay, good.
Doesn't matter. Listeners know.
Filipino.
The listeners know who the boss is.
Filipino. Anyway. I'm going Filipino.
All right, we'll just keep it in Australian
Can
accent.
I keep it? Me love you. No, we won't go there. Filipino. Palalam. Palalam.
Okay.
And that's been requested by one of our listeners, Kim. So palalam. Hopefully, I've done that all right for you, Kim.
Taking requests now, mate.
I think so, because Ivy says,
Well
do this
done.
one.
Yeah.
Do this one from Kim.
There you go, folks. I hope you got something out of those queries. And until next week, Ben.
Palalam.
Halalam, folks. Have a good week.